the Madman! Welcome to the custom cards of the week. This time around, I focused on cards that had flaws to them. Like, they're still the interesting cards, but each of them has some sort of fatal flaw. See if you can spot it before I say it. We'll start with More Pain, More Game. It's a Warlock 1 mana 1/3. With Battlecry, your hero power becomes deal 3 damage to your hero and discover a card from your deck to draw. Design, 2 stars. Balance, 2 stars. Well, I think there is something here to possibly be salvaged. The card itself faces the Kaloseth problem, which is to say when you have a card impact on a 1 mana card, a legendary especially, which could be played on turn 1 and then affect the rest of the game, and when the card makes you win the game so much more when played on turn 1, it's really bad design. You play it on turn 1, it's a 1/3, it's really good stats, and basically each life tap comes with a free tracking, and tracking is 1 mana. That's a small price to pay of 1 extra damage to do this. Where this ability might actually be playable is if you put it on a card with more mana on it, like if this were a late game card. Next up, we've got a very interesting card, Lazul's Tarot card. Priest 1 mana spell. Each turn this is in your hand, transform it into the top card of your opponent's deck. Design, 2 stars. Balance, 2 stars. I think this card is actually really busted. Sure, some people were like, with Chameleos, you just get to hold it and then you know your opponent's whole hand. But that's not always the case. Lazul's Tarot card, though, is guaranteed to not only show you a card that will be in your opponent's hand next turn, but you actually know it before your opponent does. And also, where Chameleos have weakness, where if your opponent has no hand, you can't play it, Lazul's Tarot card does not have that weakness. You hold it in your hand, and forever, you know what card they're going to be drawing. It's basically the Millennium Eye.
You presume I'm giving you a choice in the matter, but I'm not. For I too possess one of the 7 Millennium items, the all-powerful Millennium Eye.
A Millennium Eye?
And while one card that's dead in your hand might be considered, a cost to know what card your opponent is going to have forever, you can still just play the card when your opponent actually has a really good card on the top of their deck. There's a balance to be had where certainly cards that just give you a little bit about your opponent's stuff, some information is not that strong an ability, but knowing the rest of your opponent's draws forever, that's very prohibitive, that's very oppressive. Cahoon, the Blood God, a Warlock 10 mana, 4/10. Your cards have lifesteal. When you reach 30 health, destroy your hero. Well, that's certainly a very novel idea. Design, 1 star. Balance, 1 star. So there are a number of things that are a problem with Cahoon. You could actually randomly transform stuff into Cahoon if you're like the Shaman Evolve mechanics, or if you're just any transform mechanic. Could happen in dungeon runs also, where you randomly get a 10 cost card and it's Cahoon. You're at 30 health. Boom, you explode. That is terrible. So basically this card can't be printed at, an actual collectible card. There's another big problem with the card though, which is a traditional problem with the 10 mana cards. It's 10 mana kinda do nothing. If you have no board, you play it. It's just a dumb 4/10. Your opponent ignores it and then kills you because when you're at 0 health, you also lose. But let's suppose you don't die the next turn. What if you play it and you're low, which is the best time for Cahoon, and your opponent doesn't kill you? And then all of your cards have lifesteal. That's kind of cool. So you start gaining a bit of health. 30 is the new 0. By the time you get near 30, you're gonna have to toss Cahoon. You have to sacrifice them, otherwise you're gonna lose the game when you hit 30. It's an interesting drawback, but there are so many things, like just a bunch of 1/1s on the opponent's side, or maybe Swarm of Locusts, or even Nazari, that can cause you to lose the game very fast. That make Cahoon just no good. Demetrius the Loyal. It's a paladin, 1 mana, 1/3. Taunt. Start of game, if your deck has no neutral cards, draw this. Design, 1 star. Balance, 1 star. This special edition of Cards of the Week Really throw back to like all of the previous custom cards of the week that we've done. This one features start of game, do something ridiculous. Sure, you have a weakness to it. You have to have a deck with no neutral cards. And granted, that pure paladin archetype isn't that good. But believe me, if Demetrius the Loyal were ever printed, pure paladin would just by far be the best deck. It's not that much worse than the other decks, and if you're going to start the game with an extra card in your hand, and that extra card is a 1 mana 1/3 taunt, your win rate's going to go up tremendously. It's a lot similar to the Baku Paladin, or even the Gen Paladin, where yes, you have a severe weakness of only being able to run odds or evens, but the fact that you get such a strong ability, which is start the game with an extra card, and not just any extra card, it's a 1 mana 1/3 with taunt, that's ridiculous. You might even see this card played in any other Paladin deck because it's a 1 mana 1/3 taunt. Still busted at 2 mana 1/4 taunt, but a lot less busted. Conjurer's Apprentice. It's a mage 2 mana 3/2, battle cry. Discover a spell in your deck, give it cast when drawn. Design 2 cards. Design 2 stars. Balance 1 star. Cast when drawn is actually a really dangerous ability to give to anything, and we actually haven't seen this one before, so this is OP for a completely new reason. But it turns out that cheating mana is really overpowered. So suppose you discover a spell that costs a lot of mana, such as Luna's Pocket Galaxy, as probably the most ridiculous example I can think of, and you make it gain cast when drawn. That means when you draw Luna's Pocket Galaxy, you save 7 entire mana. That's a lot. Even better, by the way, cast when drawn means that you not only cast it for free, but you draw another card on top. So not only are you saving 7 mana, but you're drawing a card. So that would mean Conjurer's Apprentice is something similar to like -5 mana for a 3/2 that draws you a card. Now, granted, you have to draw the card, but what if you actually, in Wild, had Raven Familiar, and you only had Luna's Pocket Galaxy in your deck? Then you would always get Luna's Pocket Galaxy, and that would be ridiculous. You could also just run a bunch of card draw. You can also run the Elemental quest that fetches spells from your deck. This card would actually be too strong even at 5 mana, I want to say, with the same stats. Here we've got a bit of a revisit to a card theme that crops up in custom Hearthstone cards a lot. It's the good old Voltron robot thingy. It's Maximus. It's a 10 mana 5/5 mech with Taunt, Divine Shield, Lifesteal, Rush, Wind Fury, Death Rattle. Add Maximus's parts into your hand. When it dies, you break it up into 5 different parts: the arms, the legs, and the core. And they all have magnetic, and they all have a key ability, and they all add up to the original Maximus. Design 2 stars though. Balance 1 star. Wind Fury, you've got the Divine Shield, you've got the Taunt. It's got Rush instead of Charge. It's got +2 attack, which is a big deal when you have both Divine Shield and Wind Fury. But probably the biggest deal is that it's got Lifesteal. No, that's the second biggest deal. The other big deal is that you draw another copy of Maximus when it dies, basically. But it's better than that, because you can basically just reassemble Maximus by playing all 5 of the cards, but you don't have to. You could instead have a random mech sitting on the board and then just magnetize all of that onto it to build an even stronger Maximus. Or you could just spend 2 mana of it on the probably the most ridiculous one here is the 2 mana Magnetic Wind Fury card. You just have a random 5/5 mech sitting on the board, and you pay 2 mana, and you've increased the damage of that 5 damage to 12 damage. A life-stealing Alakir that gives you another Alakir when it dies. And it's not just Alakir, it's way better than Alakir, and not just Alakir, you can also build other things into Alakirs, spread out the magnetics. It's a bit much. Next up, we've got Dry Season, a Druid 2 mana spell. Set both players to 1 mana crystal until the end of your next turn. It's kind of like Time Out, where you just both waste a turn, right? That's fine. Wrong! Design 1 star, balance 1 star. That comparison is super wrong because you can play a card and then you play Dry Season. Like even the Forest 8 in the Dry Season is a play. It sets both players to 1 mana crystal until the end of your next turn. It's a little bit unclear whether or not the default Hearthstone rule where you gain a mana crystal each turn applies, since it's until the end of your next turn. But if it does, if it doesn't, it doesn't matter either way. OP either way. You play your dry season after you play the Forest Aid. Your opponent has 2 mana or 1 mana to deal with your stuff, probably nothing. So they basically pass, so it's like a time lock. You don't have any mana either, but you just attack them for 10. Or maybe you innervate, and you Savage Roar. Or maybe you innervate and then you dry season them again, and then you attack for 10 again. It's basically time lock. You take another turn. It's like giving Wind Fury to all of your cards. It's like giving charge to all of your cards, actually. And the worst thing is your opponent just sits back and takes it as they're helpless. That is extremely unfun. Probably too OP, even at 5 mana, probably. I'm like thinking about what mana cost you actually need this to be for it to be fair. It would have to be really, really high, and even then it would probably be a bad idea, just because then you just have a board, and then you play it to lock down the opponent, and then you like win the next turn. That's super unfun. Gami the Folded. 0 mana, rogue, 1/1. Battlecry, shuffle Gami the Folded into your deck. Well, yes, you have read that correctly. It is 0 mana, do nothing. Is there a problem with this? Is this actually overpowered? Like all those other cards? Is it underpowered? Did I think of some crazy combo? Is that why this design is broken? No, actually, it's just because it sucks. Design, 2 stars, balance, 1 star. Though yes, you stave off fatigue forever with 1 card. Big whoop. At the end of your deck, you can play Gami the Folded forever, you never run out of cards. Who cares? You might say, hey, the card is designed to be that traditional 0 mana rogue spell that activates your combos. And even better than that, you shuffle it back into your deck so you can do it again later. Wait, that's like the same effect as Bad Luck Albatross, where you're shuffling a really bad card to top deck later. Yes, Wisp saw a little bit of play in the meta, but that's because you mulliganed for it aggressively, and you certainly didn't want to draw it late. You wanted to try to high roll and draw it early so you could get the combo off. Gami the Folded is a Wisp that's a lot worse because it doesn't actually give you a 1/1 on the board. It gives you nothing on the board, and then it shuffles itself into your deck so that later on you are forced to draw a useless card. Even if you could find some sort of specific combo for it, it's got the problem in terms of card design that imagine you open this as your legendary and you're not building the very specific Gami the Folded deck that could eventually be OP if this effect were to like come into some sort of sick combination. It is such absolute trash for everyone else. There is also a problem with designing a card that's too niche. Alright, so let's end all this with the trump card of the week. I'm not sure if I was supposed to meme here and show like a really bad card, another bad design, but there was at least one card this week that I thought was really good. It's Eye of the Storm. The 6 mana shaman spell, choose a minion, deal 4 damage to all other minions. I love this card because it's very flavorful. It mirrors the idea that there's one safe spot in the storm, so you save that minion and everyone else takes damage. Design 5 stars. Balance 4 stars. I think the card's a little bit on the weak side though. It could be deal 5 damage to all other minions. You could even push it further and make it cost 5 mana. Maybe if you really wanted to push it, you could lower the mana by 1 and make it deal 5. But I really like the idea of the Eye of the Storm, definitely very shaman flavored, and not strictly worse than Flamestrike because it does cost less mana. Not strictly worse than Hagatha Scheme / Earthquake because it does save one of your minions potentially. Awkward because sometimes you have to choose your opponent's minion and it's saved. So for that reason, I think it definitely can get a buff. So I hope you enjoyed that edition of Trump Cards of the Week. It featured like all of the usual things that I like to tear on between start of game and cheating mana and overpowered uninteractiveness. Let's see if these people learn for more editions of Top Cards of the Week.